Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I am pleased to be joined by Allen Buchanan, who is an author who just wrote this book. Might be backwards on your screen. It's called The Sequence, and he's a broker, fellow SIOR. This book is a framework for brokers on how to succeed in the industry. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I've been connected with Alan for quite a long time on social media, but this is the first time we've actually had a conversation. So I'm really looking forward to it. Alan, first of all, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, what you're doing here is amazing. You came on my radar from the gentleman that wrote the foreword for my book, a fellow SIOR named Dave Mudge, who's a dear friend of mine. And Dave is sort of transitioning from office into industrial, and he says, "You've got to listen to this Chad Griffiths. He's amazing." So good on you for doing the heavy lifting, my friend.
Well, yeah, thank you for that, and I'll have to extend a thank you to Dave as well for that. I always enjoy getting to talk to fellow SIORs and really anybody in the industry. I've just had a fascination with talking, and I've even though I'm 20 years in the industry, I feel like I'm learning every day as well. And this has been a great conduit for me to learn more as I get to interview people like yourself who've successful career, wrote a great book. I want to dive into all of that if it's good with you.
I look forward to it. This will be fun.
Perfect. So the book is an acronym sequence, which spells out all the steps essentially in the framework. Before we even get to that, though, what can you just give me a little bit of your background on how and when you got started in the industry?
Happy to. So I grew up in a family-owned and operated business, which is ironic because that's the genre that I serve today, family-owned and operated manufacturers. Was in school at the University of Arkansas, about probably 3 months from graduation, sat down with my dad and said, "Okay, Dad, what's gonna be my first role in the family business?" And he says, "Well, son, you don't know squat, so, I'm not gonna hire you. I want you to go get a job and learn the ropes of the commercial, consumer goods business." And so I was shocked that I wasn't gonna be part of the family business, at least initially, and I moved, to the West Coast after I got a job with Procter Gamble Distributing Company. And so I spent 5 years in the consumer goods business, and I was doing well, getting promoted, and all of a sudden, we had our first child, and I'm on an airplane 3 days a week, and it just wasn't working for our lifestyle. So I started to examine, what do I do for a living? I don't really know anything other than consumer goods. And I went and sat down with a gentleman who actually was one of my early mentors, a guy by the name of Jack Atwood from the Coca-Cola bottling company in Los Angeles. And Jack said, "Have you ever considered commercial real estate?" And I said, "Don't really even know what that is." And but keep in mind, this was 1984. And he said, "Well, your dad occupies manufacturing space. We're sitting in an office suite. Commercial brokers help companies lease and buy those kinds of assets, and they also help owners find tenants." And so I said, "Yeah, it sounds interesting. How would I break into that?" He says, "Well, pick up your yellow pages, start dialing, get some interviews." And, that's what I did. That's why I ended up in the industry 41 years ago.
That's quite the journey to have the family foundation come full circle working in the consumer goods and then being on the brokerage side. Have you been in LA and Orange County the entire time, the entire 41 years?
Entire time, and been with Lee and Associates the entire 41 years as well. We had my office, the Orange, California, which is in Orange County, California office, was the second in the chain, and now we have close to 80 offices globally. I believe we have one up in your neck of the woods, if I recall.
Yep, yeah, there is one in Vancouver. Yeah,
Yep.
it's grown considerably, and Los Angeles and Orange County has grown considerably. Largest industrial market in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe there's around 2 billion square feet, give or take.
Correct. Yep. In the Inland Empire market, which is a market that I touch and have started doing more work lately, is the largest logistics market in the world. So you would just be being an SAOR and an industrial broker, you would just be it's mind numbing how much space is in that market.
Just as a quick detour, I'd just be curious to hear a little bit more about the market right now because there's a lot of news. You hear different things being told about the market with tariffs and imports and all the turmoil going on right now. How would you actually characterize your market? And maybe you could speak broadly to California, or maybe it's just Inland Empire or LA, Orange County. I'll leave it to you, but just how would you actually describe the market right now?
It's very much a tenant market right now. I listened intently to your most recent podcast with the logistics gentleman and listened with interest to what he had to say. And y'all talked about Southern California and the ports and how container loads were $20,000 in 2020, and now they're less than $2,000. But if you look at let's call it a 5-year window, and we all know what happened during the pandemic, and then everyone was at home and ordering off computer screens, and companies were having to increase inventory for just in case very, very rapidly, and so that caused this huge absorption of everything that was existing from an industrial standpoint, from 3PLs to actual providers. And so what we saw as a result of that, Chad, is we saw this dramatic increase in rents. Rents literally tripled from 2020 until 2022. Middle of 2022, when the interest rates started adjusting and the economy started to be a little more shaky, a little shakier, we've seen a steady march down. But at the same time that all this rapid absorption was taking place, interest rates, as you recall, were zero. It caused this massive increase in building, and all of the institutions and all the capital wanted to build big boxes. And when I say big boxes, buildings in excess of 7,500,000 square feet. As you get in the Inland Empire, buildings north of 200,000 square feet on up to 1.5 million square feet. So we had this massive increase in supply. At the same time, demand was starting to decline. So you had this sort of thing happening. And so we've been really, frankly, filtering through that as a result. We saw a pretty good uptick in market activity last year with Chinese 3PLs. Chinese 3PLs, if you're familiar, are very difficult to underwrite, yet they were willing to occupy space. And so there were a lot of deals. Probably 80% of the deals in the Inland Empire last year were made with Chinese 3PLs.
Hmm.
We started to see some more conventional occupants move back into the market because they were saying, gee, rates have declined. I just did a quick study yesterday on what's happening in North Orange County. The most recent deal in North Orange County Class A industrial was done at $1.47 triple net on a monthly basis. The one prior to that, which was done 6 weeks ago, that's how long it's taken between deals. Class A, 6 weeks ago was done at $1.67 triple net. So
Wow.
20 cents on a $1.67 base. That's a dramatic, dramatic increase. We're still not back to where we were 2019 pre-pandemic, but we're getting darn close. So yeah, that's a long way of saying it's a great time in the marketplace to be a tenant.
So new construction all over the country really has slowed down, and I'm assuming it's a similar in California in general. You're also dealing with warehouse moratoriums in many markets and community pushback for large industrial buildings in general. Is that material or is that more just a sensational headline?
No, it's absolutely material. You're referring to what's called AB 98, and AB 98 says that if the building is in excess of 100,000 square feet, it can't be closer than 1,000 square feet. They call them some sort of accessory or something or other. Basically, it means a school, some sort of a public park, some sort of a public building where the public accesses it. And yeah, that's a real thing. It's a real thing. And it's caused a lot of consternation among the development community. Hey, we own this piece of land. Now all of a sudden we can't get entitled for industrial. What do we do? Do we change to multifamily? Do we do some sort of a mixed use project? How do we make sense? Do we sell the land? Do we try to lease it as an iOS site? How do we make sense of this? Because we can't build what we originally were thinking of building. So it's a real deal. Yes.
Hmm. What are you hearing from companies right now? Are they You mentioned it's a tenant market. Is it a tenant market where tenants are trying to seize opportunities right now, or are you finding some tenants are still just hesitant to make any decisions?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. The real demand drivers, and I look real carefully into demand drivers on what's causing these deals to take place. And demand drivers, a term from my economic background, but demand driver would suggest, hey, what caused this company to make this move now, and why this building? So I dive into every single deal that's done in our marketplace and try to determine what that is. And the consistency I'm seeing, Chad, is it's all about efficiency right now. Um, Many companies have stemmed their growth by leasing space on a short-term basis, or they put product with a 3PL because they frankly didn't know what the future was going to hold. And as you know from talking to your previous guest, that's incredibly inefficient. You've got different management, you've got different people handling your product, you've got different customer interface. And so what we're seeing is companies for an efficiency move combining their operations under one roof. And I would say the last 7 deals that have happened in our marketplace have 100% been based upon that demand driver. We're in 3, we're in 4, we're in 5 locations. We have a 3PL, we have our mothership, we have our, our main staff, we have someone overseeing their 3PL operation. We need to get that all from a cultural, from an efficiency standpoint. We need to get that all under one roof, and that's what's driving demand today.
What's your forecast for the rest of the year? More of the same? 2025 is just a kind of a wild year, so more of the same with that?
It's just gonna be choppy. That's my I was talking to a good broker pal of mine yesterday, and I said, "Hey, we're hearing all this chatter that the tail end of 25 is gonna be good, 26 is gonna be better," and I'm saying, "I don't see the demand drivers yet. I see the efficiency. Sure, that's a nice play, but what is there a new industry? Is there a new way of doing things? Is there another pandemic, heaven forbid? What's gonna cause this, this consumption of space? And right now, I'm not seeing it. So I'm predicting it, choppy. Now we got some good, um, even though I didn't understand it, but if you listen to Jerome Powell's comments this morning and look how the market reacted, interest rates, yields dropped, stock market's going crazy. If we do in fact get 3 rate cuts for the end of the year, it could portend some good things for small business. But right now, I'm not seeing the demand drivers.
Yeah, yeah, I double down on that as well. That's similar to what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from talking to people all over North America. It's very similar on that. So things can change very quickly, as we all know, good or bad. It's the volatility that we've experienced going all the way back to 2020, March of 2020. It's been a crazy 5 years, really. So I think we'd be ill prepared if we didn't think it's going to be more craziness and unpredictability. So I think it's just the ability to respond and adapt and move quickly when new information comes in. Good pivot point. I want to talk about your book. Really enjoyed the book, by the way. Fantastic book. It'll be one that I certainly recommend, not just to anybody that's getting into the industry, but anybody that's already in the industry that just wants to sharpen their axe. Because I think there's a lot of actionable steps. It's not fluff. It's not an academic book. It's a field map, how someone can actually get better in the business. Why did you decide to write a book for 41 years in the industry?
I think it's what old gray-haired guys do, right? I mean, you're an author. You're not old and gray, but you're an author. I did it for 3 reasons, Chad. The first reason I did it is because I really believe that I had something to say. This industry has been wonderful to our family, and so I believed I had something to say. I wanted to give back, and I wanted to create sort of a tactical roadmap. So it was part legacy play and part anecdotal and in part tactical. And if you've read the book, so you know that it's based in 3 sections. The sequence, yes, is an acronym, but it's also a double entendre. So the sequence is the steps of a real estate transaction, or frankly any sales transaction. But then there's an overlaying meaning, which is the sequence of your career, the decisions that you make, the coaches that you have along the way, the mentors, then the sequence. and then the legacy piece. What have I looked back and what have I learned and what would I say to my 27-year-old self as I started in the commercial real estate business with $15,000 in the bank and a wife that just told us that she was pregnant with our second child, and wasn't going to be able to work anymore. So, all of those inflection points, I believe, are very carefully highlighted in the book. So,
One thing that you've mentioned throughout the book, and you actually even mentioned at the beginning of this call, the mentor that you had from Coca-Cola, very big on mentorship. I noticed you mentioned that multiple times. What what I think the value is obvious. I think the value of having a mentor is obvious. How do you find a mentor? How did you find your mentors along the way?
well, I happen to live with one, which is my wife of 46 years, Carla, and she is without a doubt the smartest person I've ever met, and that, and I've met a lot of people. So that one happened, I would say, quite by accident on the one hand, but yet quite providential on the other, because as you know from reading the book, I'm a man of faith, and God put Carla in my path at exactly the right time, and man, what a great ride it's been. So I think providential is one way that you come in contact with mentors. If you pray that, gee, put people in my path that I can help, share your word. How do we get that done? And keep your eyes open. It's amazing. Who knows? Maybe you and I will end up with some sort of a mentoring relationship now that we're in each other's path. But I think that's first and foremost. I think the second way that you encounter mentors is you ask. In other words, when I was at a crossroads after I'd left the consumer goods business, when I was 27 years old, I'd left a $40,000 a year job, which was big money in 1984, company car, pension plan, et cetera. Left cold turkey, and I called my dad and I said, "Hey, I don't really know what my next step is career-wise. I thought I'd be with a family business by now, but clearly I'm not. So what do you suggest?" And he says, "Well, talk to my friend Jack Atwood, who was in Los Angeles. My dad had met him in the National Soft Drink Bottlers Association." So recommendations are another great way to find mentors. And then I think the third way is the way I found the balance of my mentors through my working life. Dwayne Kohlberg with Procter and Gamble, who taught me how to write. John Earnhardt, who taught me how to solve problems, who taught me that, the deal ain't done until the broker's been paid. Paul Earnhardt, his younger brother, who taught me how to qualify transactions better than anyone I've ever seen. And then more recently, through my coaching with the Massimo Group, Doug Molyneux has been a magnificent mentor. So I would say those are the three ways. Either you fall into it from a providential standpoint, you're referred into it, or through your business contacts, you encounter it. But, even at 68 years old, I still have mentors this day that I talk with that I really truly rely upon their opinion and their guidance.
I think that should be encouraging for everybody to hear that even after a successful 41-year-old career, and you don't look a day over. You actually look very young. I wouldn't have guessed 68. So that's got to be a testament to have done the business the right way without being stressed every single day. Where some brokers, you can see them 10 years in, they feel like they've actually aged 30 years. So it's a testament that you've done it the right way. I I want to talk because of over 41 years, I'm 20 years in the business. I've seen a lot of new brokers get into the industry, and I've had a lot of new brokers reach out and ask questions. You're double the time that I've had in the industry, so I'm assuming you've seen at least double the amount of new brokers get into the industry, and some make it, some don't. I would say that actually it might even be the 80-20 rule, that 80% probably don't make it, 20% go on to have great careers. What so let's frame it from the standpoint of someone reaches out to you and they're considering getting into the industry. Do you guide them along the way in terms of saying, here's the brokerage that I'd consider, here's the asset class that I'd consider, here's the team that I'd consider? Or are you trying to flush out questions from them, recognizing that everyone's going to be somewhat unique in their own regard?
I would say that I that I would probably hedge more toward the second thing that you mentioned. Um, It's interesting that you asked the question because one of the cool things that I get to do with my role with a company now is I get to do training, and I'm starting a new training program on September 2nd with 20 of our newbies in the Orange County and Riverside County offices, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think it really goes back to you have to define the why, right? Why the heck do you want to be in the commercial real estate business? And a lot of times I'll get the answer, well, I want to make a lot of money.
Mm,
Well, you can make a lot of money doing a lot of things. Some would say, I don't know if you've read Nick Huber's book, Sweaty Startup, but some would say a sweaty startup is a much better way to make a living, doing HVAC maintenance or, trash collection or something that someone else doesn't want to do. That's a much better way to make a lot of money. You can certainly make a lot of money in the tech world, creating a startup. My gosh, you can be an influencer on social media and make a lot of money. So why do you want to make 100 calls a day and be rejected on 90 of them and not really have a true path in terms of the end game in our business? Because our business, as you know, Chad, it's brutal. It is frigging brutal. And I think it's harder now than it was when I started 41 years ago, believe it or not. Um, so that's really important. What's the why? I know what my why was. My why was I didn't want to be on an airplane 3 days a week. I wanted to be a present father and husband. I didn't want to have any cap on my income. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. I didn't want inventory responsibility. And frankly, commercial real estate checked all those boxes. But I would say if you can't clearly define your why, you need to question whether this is the right business for you. So let's assume that the why is answered correctly, right? And if you've listened to Barbara Corcoran, she says that she can tell within the first 20 seconds of an interview whether someone's going to be successful in real estate or not. And it all boils back to that why. Okay. So first and foremost, the why. Once the why is in place, then I think you have to step back and say, okay, do I want to be an office broker? Do I want to be an industrial broker? Do I pride myself as wanting to do triple net leased investments on a national basis? Do I want to be a land broker? Sort of what's the direction? And then based upon that, there are companies that do a wonderful job. As an example, in the mid 90s, I tried to break into doing institutional dispositions. And so I was calling on Principal Mutual and MetLife and all the biggies. And I was getting my hat handed to me because I was with the wrong company. Lee and Associates in 1994 was not a company that institutions thought about when they thought about selling their properties. So if you're going to go into that institutional world, there are probably companies that are very well at doing that. In other words, CB Richard Ellis is amazing at doing that. Cushman & Wakefield is amazing at doing that. JLL is amazing at doing that. Lee and Associates are getting better at doing that, but are we the best in terms of an institutional property owner representative? In some markets we are, in some markets we're not. So think very carefully about that. And then finally, to your previous point, mentor. Who's the very best person within the very best company that's doing the asset class that I want to do that I can team up with? And then do everything in your power to do what they don't want to do. Maybe they don't know social media, maybe you do. Maybe they don't know AI, maybe you do. Maybe they don't want a cold call, maybe you're good at that. But you need to sort of make yourself valuable to that mentor. Because to your point, 80% attrition rate in our business. We did a study in 2017 in my office. We were losing 83% of our new hires. So
mm,
17%. So roughly a person and a half out of 10 was staying with us for any period of time. And we realized the biggest reason that was happening is we were doing a lousy job of recruiting. We were doing a lousier job at vetting. We weren't training them and we weren't mentoring them. And finally, we weren't coaching them. So what we discovered is you can put the very best person in place, but unless you properly train them, you mentor them, and you coach them. So in other words, that triad, you're going to have the sort of attrition that you described. We employed those three things, and our attrition went from 83% to 47%.
wow.
Still not great, but we're keeping one in every two people that we hire, and we're very proud of that.
That's a remarkable improvement, even though, like you said, you ideally you want to have 100% if in a perfect world, but that's also unobtainable in most scenarios. But to go from 17% to 49%, you said? Roughly one
47, 47. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
That's a huge accomplishment. So I think that's a great message for anybody in the space right now that is in charge of a brokerage. If you're in the leadership capacity or a partner capacity, take heed to that. What on the agent side, how do you find the office? Because it's just as important to for the agent to find the right place as they answer the why. They've got a convincing why on what it means to them and why they want to do it. How do they find the office that is going to be more committed to that? Call it 50% are going to last versus only 17% are going to last. How, as an agent, do you find that right office that is going to be dedicated to coaching and training and and proper onboarding? How do you identify that?
Well, I think it's partially, trial and error. In other words, I think you have to kiss a lot of frogs. I can tell you that when I started in 1984, I had just completed 5 years in corporate America, Procter& Gamble, E&J Gallo Winery, and Procter& Gamble is incredibly corporate. You know, you couldn't wear a blue shirt except on Fridays. That was considered casual Friday when you wore a blue shirt rather than a white shirt. So it was very, very corporate, very structured training, very structured methods in which you did things, processes, the way you talk to people, the way you hired people, et cetera. It's very, very structured. Gallo was and is the largest independently owned, one of the largest independently owned companies in the United States, and very structured as well, but different structure, right? So when I started the commercial real estate business, I didn't want the structure. I didn't want the structure. It felt like I had the structure. What I needed was I needed the runway. I needed the clear path. I needed someone to say, yeah, um, keep little to the right here, a little to the left here, stay down the middle. I didn't feel like I needed, hey, here's how you set an objective. Here's how you achieve a goal. Here's how you dress. Here's what you do in a meeting, et cetera. So I think it's different for everyone. But, you know, at that time in 1984, Chad, there were four pretty predominant companies in Orange County, California. And I talked to all of them, and I talked to two of them three or four times. So it's a matter of you'll know when something feels right, when it feels comfortable. Am I after the training? You know, as an example, if I want to do triple net leased investments nationally, you know the three or four firms in the United States that do a brilliant job of that. Now, maybe they're not the best at training, but they're the best in that product type. If you want to do land up development, there are offices that do a wonderful job at that. If you want to do institutional disposition work, you know, clearly we've mentioned several firms that do a good job at that. So I think it's in large part trial and error, kiss a lot of frogs, and do what feels comfortable. When I joined Lee and Associates, it just felt comfortable. It felt like the right place to be, and I guess I got very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, similar story to myself as well. When I started in 2005, the firm that I joined, it felt right. I actually had two interviews lined up. The one that I ended up joining, and then one after. And the one first one went so well that I missed the second one because we ended up chatting for with the managing partner for probably 2 hours, and then I took the job right after. So it felt right. So I think that intuition, gut feeling is really important. Would love to get your thoughts on how the brokerage industry has changed and evolved over 41 years. And you mentioned there are four big firms in Orange County. I'm guessing they weren't nearly as big as they were today, where like a CBRE or a JLL, Fortune 500 companies, they're integrated into various elements now. So they've got they're building maintenance and property management and internal appraisals. So they've become juggernauts in the industry now. Then you also have small boutique shops, which might be in one city only, and there might be five people in that office. Is that how would you try to steer somebody that's getting into the industry that perhaps has an opportunity to join one of the really large brokerages versus joining a boutique office?
Say it really once again revolves around what you're gonna be doing because there's some boutiques that do a phenomenal job at niches, and then you get more of a generalized approach with one of the big companies, the CBRE, the Cushman, the JLLs. And so it really depends on, the focus, the direction where you see your career heading. Um, I've seen some amazing regional companies. We've got one locally, Voight, you may have heard of. Voight's, I think, got 5 or 6 offices. They're dominant. They just do a really, really good job. They do a good job of recruiting and training, and they do a very good job of managing the marketplace as well. So that would be how I would respond to that. Um, and as you and I both know, as I've found, biggest isn't always best, right? The 4 that were pretty predominant in Orange County when I looked, Lee& and Associates, but we were the smallest. I mean, we had 2 offices, we had 35 agents, so we were tiny. We're not tiny anymore. But Coldwell Banker Commercial, which went on to be CB Richard Ellis, Grubb& and Ellis, which went on to become Newmark, and then we had a smaller regional company called Ashwell Schneider that's now Ashwell Associates locally. So, and pretty much that was it. If you wanted to go into the commercial real estate business, you had 3 or 4 choices, and those were the 3 or 4 choices. So, yeah, that's how I'd respond to that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Dovetailing onto that, with AI being the dominant topic right now across every industry, I'm actually getting to the point where I'm getting fatigued with hearing about AI and talking about AI because it's so prevalent. But it's prevalent for a reason because it is so important and it's becoming so integrated into the business. Do you see AI perhaps leveling the playing field between the boutique shops and the large brokerages in terms of information asymmetry, where now all of a sudden with AI, in theory at least, you can access large amounts and synthesize a large amount of data very quickly. Do you see AI leveling that playing field at all, or is there still going to be a gap between the large brokerages and the boutique shops?
Boy, great question. I would say, as I sit here today in August of 2025, that AI is not going to be as big a leveler as nationwide data access was. And what do I mean by that? When I first started in 1984, you had to know your turf. You had to know your market. You had to know the owners. You had to know the tenants. There was no multiple listing service per se. So you had to create your own and chart your own inventory. So if you got a requirement, someone wanted 20,000 square feet of space, you had to know the buildings, you had to know the owners, you had to know kind of where to turn over the rocks. When some of our national multiple listing services came into play in the mid 90s, that playing field really became leveled. So now all of a sudden, someone in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania could be a tenant rep and do business in Southern California if they had a subscription to the National Data Service. And that really, I wouldn't say it ended the sort of specificity that we had in our market, but it certainly made it a more level playing field because you had competition that you didn't have before. I believe AI is going to have to. It's funny. I was on the line yesterday with a CRM provider, and we were talking about some ways to differentiate. I think the company that figures out how to have silos of data talk to one another in our world, I think that's the one that figures it out. What do I mean by that? Right now, we've got available inventory in one silo. We've got comparable lease information in another silo. We've got comparable sale information in a third silo. We've got our occupant database in a fourth silo. We've maybe got our own CRM. Maybe that's a fifth silo. None of that's talking to each other. We've got our social media contacts. That's in again a sixth, seventh, and eighth silo. So you got all these silos of data. And this conversation yesterday was, man, what if you figured out a way to have all those silos of data talk to one another? Chat's getting close to that with their connectors. So you can now connect your Outlook database to your Dropbox to everything that you've trained that model to do. As soon as that now causes all those silos to talk to one another, I think that's the differentiator. When does that happen? I mean, who knows? I'm told that it could be by the end of the year. You'll be able to connect your social channels. But can you imagine being able to do that?
Huh.
Being able to attach your LinkedIn and have it talk to your CRM and have that in touch talk with the available data inventory? That would be a game changer.
That would undoubtedly unlock a lot of opportunity because you're right, it's fragmented right now. So inherently the LinkedIn, everything that you have, the number of connections you have there are not correlated whatsoever with your internal database. So to have those overlap, and if you pulled up a contact and you had their LinkedIn profile mapped to it, that would actually be very powerful in terms of unlocking opportunities. So yeah, that'd be very fascinating to see. Are
Yeah, and
you
it's that and that's coming, right? That's coming. So then all of a sudden it becomes now you've got access to those various silos. I mentioned 7 or 8 of them. You've got these silos of data that are now talking to one another. So now you as a practitioner have to figure out how to manipulate and use that to your and your client's best advantage. And that's where I think the next big push will come. Someone's going to figure that out. Someone's going to crack that code. And because I forever have been saying, guys, why do we have 5 silos of data? Why can't we just have it all on one page? I want to be able to pull up a property address and I want to be able to see the owner. I want to be able to see the tenant. I want to be able to see the 3 most recent lease transactions. And some have gotten kind of close to that, but you know as well as I, the lease data is the most proprietary and in some cases the most critical to making deal decisions. And that's what's missing. And as soon as we get that figured out and get all of those silos talking to one another, I think it becomes a completely different business.
are you finding there's a gap between those who are enthusiastically embracing AI and those that are stubbornly refusing it?
100%. And you're talking to someone that embraced it very early in 2023, but then kind of took a step back and said, holy cow, I remember when social media broke on the scenes and how I embraced that. And do I have the energy to do it again? That was what I went through personally. And lately I've said, yeah, I do have the energy because I still got some holes left to play here and I'm not ready to hang up the cleats.
What would you say you're using it for predominantly, or where are you getting value from it right now?
I find it incredibly effective at consolidating thoughts into words. It doesn't do my writing for me, but it sure guides my writing in a way that hasn't been before. One of the banes of our existence, as you know, is marketing reports. In other words, who's inquired, what's the status of their requirement, how do we keep track of all that? I've used AI extensively to help me with that, to the point where I just dump raw data onto a Word document. In other words, Chad Griffiths calls and says, hey, Alan, is your project at 759 Eckhoff available? Yes, it is. I've got a 100,000 square foot requirement that I'm going to be touring in the next 3 weeks. Can you shoot me a brochure and some pricing information? So I put that raw data onto a Word document. I copy and paste the Word document into ChatGPT and say, spit out a marketing report. I want Chad's name, Chad's contact information, the size of his requirement, and what the latest update is. And it spits it out in a magical format that I can forward to the client. So that's been a huge time saver for me. Um, I've started toying with uh, with cartoons, which I'll send you my latest, which I think is kind of funny. But you could put in a situation, and the situation I put in this morning was, we had Jerome Powell talking in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he said all these things and the market said all these things. And so the cartoon is, what Jerome said and what the market heard kind of thing. And so I think that's pretty cool. And AI can whip that out for you in record time. And then lastly, the connectors, which came out about 2 weeks ago, where you can connect Dropbox, Outlook, etc. I'll have it go through and, hey, pull out all of the recent inquiries that I've had on this type of property. And what does that look like? And what does that portend? And how do I then go about using that to help my prospecting or the meetings that I want to try to schedule? So that's a few ways that I'm using it.
Yeah, I love how there are three distinct uses too. There's a marketing end to it. There's an organizational end to it. There's a strategy end to it. I think that's. I try to look at it the same way. And where I've probably got the most benefit personally is exactly how you described the first one. Is that taking something that is all the ingredients. So if it's making a painting, you've got all the paint, you've got the canvas, you've got everything there, but you need it put together and packaged into something more professional. I think that's been the biggest time saver for me as well, is not necessarily creating anything new from scratch, but trying to combine everything into a better package. That's been very useful for me as well.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the book with a little bit of remaining time that we have here. So we talked about new agents coming into the market. I think this is a great book for those who are in the industry already and perhaps are stagnant. Perhaps they hit a ceiling. They don't know how to go any further. Maybe it's the economy. Maybe they're in a market that's struggling. We've all been through there of ups and downs. I think if you wanted to sharpen the proverbial axe, this is a good book to pick up to do it. I'd recommend everybody pick up the book, but in the time that we have here, what would you say to somebody that's in that position? So business stalled out, or it's the economy, maybe it's personal, maybe they just can't get over that hump. What do you say to someone that's already in the industry that just wants to take their business to the next level?
I'd say zoom out. How's that?
Well, let's expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah. I was in that position in 2017 where I was a consistent, mid six-figure producer. I wanted to become a consistent seven-figure producer because in my world, that meant I had achieved the status of being an elite producer. Elite producer means different things to different people, but to me, that was elite in my marketplace. So clearly, I had done it for 30 something years and I had reached a bit of I'd reached a bit of a peak, if you will. I didn't know how to grow past that. So what I did is I zoomed out and I took a look at how I was doing what I was doing, who I was serving, and who could help me become better at all those things and maybe see things a bit differently and also hold me accountable. And that's when I looked into professional coaching. And that's frankly, which happened 7, 8 years ago. That's frankly what took me to the next level. It wasn't that I necessarily did things all that much differently, but I did them differently enough that caused that, caused that production to increase to that elite level. And some would say, well, gee, you also benefited from a good market. Well, true. However, first year of doing that was 2019, and values were not in 2019 what they were in 2021. So, and you look at the production in 2019 versus the production in 2025, dramatically different, but roughly the same. So I went from doing 50, 60 deals a year to doing 10 to 15 deals a year and making the same amount of money. So that means a lot of margin increased. So if someone's struggling or if they've hit that plateau and they don't know how to take it to that next level, I would zoom out. I would absolutely zoom out, not dig in, which is what most do. Most dig in, work harder, work more hours, try to do more deals. No, zoom out. Maybe there's a different way of doing things that you're not considering.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good tip because that's what I've found myself doing, and I've watched a lot of other people doing it. Is you just try to work harder. So it's you think it's a linear progression where if you're making X by working Y, well, then just work Y times two, and you should be able to make X times two. And that's not always the case. So I think that is the tendency for people to just dig in. You've been with Santa Massimo Group or Massimo Group for since, is that who you started with for coaching going back to
Correct.
2000?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Initially investigated 2017, chose not to do it. Actually did it in the middle of 2018 and did it for 5 years. Um, Called Rod in 2023 and I said, "I have some good news and some bad news." And he says, "Well, what's the bad news?" I said, "Well, the bad news is I'm not gonna use you as a coaching organization anymore." He says, "Well, what's the good news?" I said, "The reason I'm not using you anymore is because I've achieved every goal that I set out to achieve. And let's count that as a win. Let's count that as a success. And let's continue to be pals," which we are. Um, so, so yeah, 5 of the very best years that I spent in my career, just transformational, absolutely transformational in what I learned and in what the way I do business today versus the way I did business in 2017. Transformational.
Could you summarize, or is that an impossible question to answer given how many variables there would have been? But can you summarize how different it would have been from now versus back then? How your business has changed?
Sure. And let me just, as you know, I love stories. Let me just give you a quick story as to pre Massimo Allen and post Massimo Allen. So I had a client that I sold a building, and it was a good sized building with some excess land. And the excess land was separately parcelized. And he didn't need the excess land. But what I explained to him is buy it because look at everything around you. They're not building any more land. And this is going to be a wonderful development site. And even though you're not looking at it today, think about your legacy. Because I deal with a lot of family owned and operated businesses, and they always think about legacy. Think about the legacy. Can't you see your heirs, owning 300,000 or 400,000 square feet on this vacant acreage? He thought that was a great idea. He bought the building, he closed the deal. He ran his business out of the front piece. The back piece we leased to a company that stored containers. So, and this was in 2015. So in 2020, I discovered that he had sold the back acreage. And this was a guy that I talked to every 90 days and kept in great touch with him, sent him market data. And he sold it, and I never did even get a sniff that he was thinking of selling it, even though we'd had the conversation. So pre-Massimo Allen would have been devastated, taken a year to recover. But what did post-Massimo Allen do? I said, all right, let's think about that in terms of what does that mean for the market? Who else do I know that might be in a similar position that could benefit from knowing about this, that might in fact be a seller? I made 2 phone calls. The second call I made was a building I had sold in the same market. And I said, look, this just happened. This is what I see occurring. You're all living in Arizona. You don't need to own a property in California anymore because you're paying property taxes, or you're paying income taxes on California property when you could benefit from not. And so we sold it. It was a $20 million sale. And we took those $20 million and we parlayed that into $20 more million. So $40 million of sale, which is post Massimo, or pre Massimo, I wouldn't have, I've been devastated and not looked for the opportunity. I think it's just that little way of looking at losses a little differently that that has spelled the difference.
So you're training 21 new people? Did I catch that number correct? 21
Yes.
new people. So
Yes, yes, yes.
that's another shift in your business. And your business has evolved over 41 years, I'm sure multiple times. What does the next decade look for you?
I've got 3 more books I want to write. I want to write one similar to yours that's more of a, hey, by the way, congratulations on yours.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
One that's a little more focused on an occupant or an owner of industrial real estate. And so I've got that in my mind. as you know, I've done the Tuesday traffic tips for 12 years. I want to compile those into a sort of a how-to tip book. And then I, believe it or not, started on a novel, sort of a la John Grisham, but a commercial real estate novel, which probably three people will read.
Well, I'll be one of them. Call it for.
It, it's not a terribly riveting subject, but I got to figure out a way to make it riveting. So there's that. Um, I want to see where this training takes me. I don't want to be a coach per se. I want to be a trainer. I like the idea of training. Coaching, I love to be a participant in. I don't know that I would want to coach. So training, I think, has got a big thing. And then, we've got a cool thing we're doing personally is our oldest grandson turns 10 in 2 weeks. So we told all our grandkids when they turn 10, we'll take them anywhere in the United States they want to go. So it'll be just the three of us, my wife, Carla, me, and the grandchild. So that means we'll have a trip in next year, in the 5 succeeding years, and then we'll skip 3, and then I'll have our 6th one. So I'm really looking forward to that. The first trip we're going to take is to the Florida Keys with our oldest because he loves to fish, and so that's going to be it. And then finally, my wife and I have 14 more states, United States, to visit because we wanted to visit all 50 starting in 2017. So, yeah, in addition to that, maybe make a real estate deal here or there.
Yeah, that's always a good goal to have. That sounds like you're
Yeah.
gonna have quite a busy time of writing and traveling and seeing the U.S. Yeah, that's very cool. Anything that I missed? Anything you wanted to talk about with the book in particular, or anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to add at the end here?
I don't believe so, Chad. I have to thank you for, gosh, such a generous investment of time and such a generous endorsement of the book. You really struck at the heart of why I wrote the sequence, and it has resonated throughout professionals, young and old, the way I'd want it to, which is you see it as a journey as well as, tactical. And so in that, I believe it's been a huge success. And I just want to thank you so much. You and I don't know each other well, but we're getting to know each other better. I hope to see you in Kentucky at the SIOR conference in a couple of months. And yeah, we'll just continue the conversation.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to keeping the conversation going as well. And what I would say is, just as a closing on the book, I've endorsed it clearly. I'm very much in support of this. I'm going to recommend to a lot of people. I think this will be a book that sells for 10 to 20 years because it's timeless information. I think that as people get into the industry, or they hit that plateau, or they just want to get to the next level, I think that this book will be on the shelves and selling for a long time just because of the quality of information in there. So kudos to you for writing it. It's well needed in the industry. And I think that this will help a lot of people either get into it or take their business to the next level. So thanks for jumping on this call with me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to keeping the conversation going as well.
Indeed. Thank you so much, my friend. I really, really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how quickly an hour goes when we're doing these podcasts, and this one was no exception. So thank you once
That
again.
that and my therapist. That hour just seems to fly by.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again, Alan.